Hello Internet, Seth Skorikowski, and today we're going to begin discussing the Pulp Cthulhu campaign, The Two-Headed Serpent. Written by Paul Fricker, Scott Dorward, and Matthew Sanderson, it was published by Chaosium in 2017. Coming in at a whopping 272 pages, it is a 1930s globe-spanning adventure packed with action, intrigue, and crazy pulpy goodness. In addition to the main book, there are two accessory PDFs that Game Masters can get, one for quick references and the other for handouts. The campaign is broken into 9 adventures, but players might not experience all those adventures just depending about what choices they make in the game and how the campaign ends up playing out. Currently, our group is halfway through chapters 2 and chapters 5, so we're actually not finished with this campaign yet, which means 2 things. 1, it means that this series is going to take us a while. I'm expecting this campaign to last us another 6 months before we're finished with it, and I'm only going to review the individual adventures once we've actually played them. 2, it also means that there's going to be a few pieces of information about the overall game plot that I'm going to be leaving out of my reviews until either my players have discovered them or until they're no longer relevant to our own game. I'm not going to spoil my own game while we're doing reviews. Now this episode is only going to cover Chapter 1, Bolivia. So this is going to be part review and part game diary, but I'm going to offer my tips and my suggestions as a game master who has run this scenario.
And I'm Jack the NPC. I'm going to be giving this one to you from a player's side of things.
The adventure comes with 6 pre-generated characters that the players can use, either as their primary characters or as emergency backup characters, or maybe you could just use them as a trusty NPC that's going along with them for the adventure. To prepare your players, the book offers this section that keepers should give to them before the campaign starts. It explains that the PCs are all going to be employed by the Caduceus Foundation, an aid organization which is offering relief to the civilians caught up in the Chaco War. However, Caduceus is more than just an aid organization. Its true purpose is combating the Mythos, but their players don't know this yet. The players should then make their characters accordingly. For my game, I told my players that I required each of them to have at least one combat skill that was going to be set at 50 or higher. Now, what that skill was completely up to them. It could be dodge, it could be brawl, it could be rifle shotgun, whatever it was they wanted. But since this is going to be such an action-oriented game, I wanted them to have at least one skill that could handle that. And this is what they gave me. Buck Meyer, Grease Monkey Mechanic. Jane Darling, their femme fatale pilot. Patrick Patchemup, the steadfast doctor and former Marine. And JJ, their two-fisted muscle demolitions expert and owner of the greatest character portrait I have ever seen. I giggle every time I look at that thing. Now, one question that a lot of people ask is if this campaign can just be played using regular 7th edition Call of Cthulhu instead of using Pulp Cthulhu.
Yeah, let me answer this one. Think of this like Jurassic Park. The question isn't whether you could, the question is whether you should. Because yeah, you could easily convert this for just 7th edition Call of Cthulhu and try to play it. But for reasons that are going to become very clear once we start this review, you really don't want to try that. This adventure is designed for Pulp Cthulhu, meaning that it is expecting that your players have the expanded hit points, have the archetype skills, have the special abilities, and all the expanded luck abilities that Pulp Cthulhu offers. In order not to wipe out your party in the first 5 minutes of the campaign, a keeper would have to edit this down to the point that it would lose all the flavor that makes it so good. It'd be like editing John Carpenter's The Thing down to the point that had a G rating. Yeah, I guess you could do that, but why would you even want to?
And on that note, I need to warn you that from this moment forward, there will be spoilers. So if you wish to experience the Two-Headed Serpent as a player, you should stop here, but send your Game Master this way to see if it might be a right fit for your group. Alright, Keepers, let's get started. The chapter begins with a timeline of events that begins 11 days before the start of the adventure. A stray artillery shell broke a capstone of an ancient serpent person temple, releasing a formless spawn that then decimated the soldiers on both sides. The Caduceus Foundation believes that this is one of the wards that protected an ancient temple that houses a mummy priestess. Caduceus wants the mummy and any artifacts to study before they could possibly fall into the wrong hands. However, an evil organization of serpent people known as the Inner Night has also learned of this temple and has dispatched 3 agents in order to recover the artifacts. These serpent people have then taken on the likenesses of 3 Bolivian officers and through magic have entranced 20 soldiers into their unwilling slaves to assist them. The module provides a map of the area showing the key locations, including where the heroes are going to be entering the story. The adventure opens with the team of heroes traveling through the jungle with a team of doctors and nurses in order to get to the aid camp. However, the module doesn't say exactly or any vaguely how many doctors and nurses this could possibly be. So for my game, I said that it was going to be 3 doctors in addition to Patch, and then 6 nurses, and then they also had 6 mules that were completely loaded down with supplies and medicine and anything else that they might need. I also suggest that keepers choose a player character, either the strongest player character or the one with the highest electronic skills, to be carrying a backpack that's got a radio in it. Now this radio is going to still require that they run the antenna up like a tall tree or some other tall structure, but it's some way that they can talk to Caduceus since the radio in the aid camp has mysteriously gone silent. The adventure begins on the trail to the aid camp. Their team leader, an Italian doctor named Arturo Orsini, brings the heroes together in order to tell them what their mission is. Now for my game, I chose that he brought them all up to the front of the caravan line in order to talk to them.
I apologize, my friend, for not having a chance to tell you this before we leave, but your mission in Bolivia is different than everyone else's. You are on a secret and special mission. You see, Caduceus, it is not what she pretends to be. Our real mission in Bolivia is— Holy crap! Is this the start of the adventure?
That's right. The entire campaign opens with a gunfight, the opening shot killing their boss. The leader of the Serpent People, a villainous character named Carnash, is leading 6 soldiers against the player characters, and he's also got some sort of serpent person dog with him. The spot that I messed up on this scenario, or this section here, was that I made the call that since the soldiers were all going to be hiding in the jungle, that the player characters needed to make spot checks in order to see them. Now I gave them a bonus die for this because there were going to be plumes of gun smoke coming out and leaves getting shredded as buckshot was headed their way. And then on the second round I gave it a second bonus die, that way they could spot them. And then on the third round I said it was automatic. At this point so much foliage has been blown out and there's shouting and all sorts of things. But for the first 2 rounds of combat they might not see where all the bad guys are. But even with the bonus dice, it actually took all 3 rounds before all my characters could see the bad guys. They had some spectacularly bad rolls starting this campaign off. Buck then charges off into the jungle and then was promptly rewarded with getting 2 shotgun blasts that nearly killed him outright. Once the fight begins, swinging towards the player characters having the victory, Carnash is going to try to flee the scene. One of my players saw this and they shot him, so Carnash employed the pulp ability of Lookout Master, and one of the Mook soldiers jumped in the way of the bullet and took the killing blow themselves. But before Carnash could finish running away, another player character shot him and brought him down. Once the enemies are all either captured or killed, the PCs are going to find several items in the pockets of their former boss, including a map and a mission briefing instructing them to recover a mummy. On the dead serpent person's body, they're going to find several interesting items, including this strange map. Once the PCs then lead the caravan to the aid camp, they're going to have a nice collection of non-player characters to meet. The module presents the aid camp as a great place to roleplay, but since the adventure began opening up with a combat of the PCs fighting the soldiers, and my players had discovered that there was a serpent person disguised as one of the officers, my players chose then to leave the aid camp because they didn't want any retribution falling down on all of the doctors and all of the nurses and all of the poor civilians that were kind of now being caught up in the middle of this. Then, at this point, my players were then a little lost as to what they were supposed to be doing, and at this point I had Dr. Gomez suggest that maybe they should call Caduceus.
Oh yeah, we've been lugging this heavy radio around all day. I was wondering what it was for.
Once the PCs get on the radio, they're going to speak with Quentin Shapiro, who's going to instruct them to gather all the artifacts that they can from this temple and bring the mummy back alive. Now, if they need any special equipment or anything like that, Caduceus can arrange for an airdrop to happen in order to bring them some necessary supplies. For my players, the prospect of getting an airdrop was far more exciting to them than the whole part about there being a living mummy.
Holy crap, guys, a freaking airdrop! I have always wanted one of those. We should have him airdrop us like a single sandwich. That would be freaking hilarious. We gotta come up with something great for them to airdrop us.
Somewhere in here, keepers are going to need to bring in the monkey with the flame pistol. It can happen at any time, but keepers should really bring this in before the player characters reach the battle site where the first ward is located. The battle site is going to be strewn with corpses and equipment. Since these soldiers died when the formless spawn attacked, there should be a lot of gear still left lying around. Keepers, I suggest that you use the battle site as sort of an improvised supply cache for the players. They might need some spot rolls in order to find anything that they're looking for or find some really cool items. And they might need to make some repair rolls or some firearm skill checks in order to repair any vehicles or firearms that they find lying around. For my game, they used this supply cache in order to find rope, kerosene lanterns, shovels, a Lewis gun that had 3 full drums of magazine, gasoline, a fixable truck, and 2 anti-personnel mines. The ward itself that's located in the heart of this battle site is a 50-foot wide, 1,000-foot deep hole. The image doesn't really give this justice as to how huge this is, so with a little Photoshop I made this. This is how daunting of a hole we're looking at. Many of the stairs leading down were broken as pieces of the broken capstone fell and crashed, smashing them up. So now players are going to have to jump across and make climb checks in order to get across some of the gaps in the stairway. During this time, when the PCs were going down the stairs and they were trying to jump across a particularly treacherous gap, is when I had the formless spawn crawl up from beneath and attack them. This was a harrowing fight, since the player characters are essentially standing on a ledge of these steps, and at this point they're 300 feet above the floor, and they're 700 feet below the surface, which means light is pretty scant. The entire sky is just this little hole far, far above them. And because the creature is going to be immune to most forms of damage, the flame pistol was the only thing that saved them here.
Which means it might also be fun if among the weapons that the player characters find on an abandoned battlefield is a single, half-empty flamethrower.
Once the PCs reach the bottom and read the murals down there, they're going to discover that this ward was simply one of 5 wards that surround a temple, forming a pentagram around it. And the temple that's in the middle is this giant stone screw that's going to slowly come rising out of the jungle every time one of these wards are broken. The player characters are still going to need to find the other wards, but deciding how the pentagram looks, which way it goes, it's not going to be hard to figure out once they find the second ward.
But please bear in mind that after walking down that 1,000-foot deep pit, we had to climb back up it all the way to the top. And we didn't just do this once. We went 500 feet down on the first attempt, then realized that we needed to get some freaking rope, so we had to go all the way back up. And then we went all the way back down to the bottom, did our thing there, and then had to climb 1,000 feet all the way back up to the top. Needless to say, after this adventure and all this stair climbing, our butts look amazing.
With the aid of their newly acquired army truck, my player characters then charged off across the jungle and correctly guessed where that next ward was going to be. But once they arrived there, they ended up getting ambushed by another serpent person and a team of soldiers. It was a harrowing fight, and you could actually put this next team wherever you want. That's where I chose to have them. But you need to keep in mind that there's actually 2 teams of serpent people and soldiers that are going to be creeping around the jungle looking for these wards as well. Drop them in wherever you want. Once they discovered the second ward, Patch had a great idea.
Okay guys, now that we know where 2 of these wards are, we can figure out where the rest of them are pretty easy. It's just simple geometry. But instead of opening this thing up and fighting whatever the hell comes out trying to kill us, I say we go across into the next ward that we think the serpent people are about to go to, and if we beat them there, we lie in wait and we ambush them the moment they show up.
The plan worked flawlessly, and now with their enemies out of the way, the player characters could then take their time opening up the wards and killing off the formless spawn as they emerged.
Oh yeah, once we figured out that fire was the key to hurting those things, it was not that hard for us to take the rest of those formless spawns out. Just an anti-personnel mine lying next to a jerry can of gasoline. We had this little magic whistle that we found that could summon them and make them go wherever we wanted them to go, so that made it really easy for them to charge directly at us through a minefield, and then boom! Almost killed one too that way, and it also did answer the question that the only thing scarier than a formless spawn charging at you at full speed is a flaming formless spawn charging at you at full speed.
The module says that a demolition check should not be necessary in order to blast away the capstone in order to get down into the ward. The reason for that is you don't want a failed skill roll to bring a grinding halt to the game because now they have no way of getting into the ward. However, I had a character that has a very high demolitions, and I wanted him to use it, and he wanted to use it, so what I did is that I allowed him to make some skill rolls with demolitions. The correction that I made is that if demolitions is used correctly, it blasts the stone off of the hull, allowing free access, but doesn't break the stone that then comes crashing down and destroying the stairs. So if that demolitions roll fails, or if you don't have anyone that even rolls a demolition roll because it's not a very common skill, then you can have it where pieces of the stone fall down and they break stairs, and now the PCs, in order to get down, are going to have to make jump and climb checks just like they did in the first one. Once 3 of these wards are destroyed, the temple emerges fully from the jungle and a door opens that leads to a spiraling tunnel. After some obstacles along the way, the player characters come to a grand chamber. The chamber door is guarded by a serpent archway that's got these gemstone eyes, and these act like the guardians from the never-ending story that blast a death ray at any non-serpent person that enters the main chamber. Anyone who survives this death ray is going to discover that the area that the ray hit them is now going to be covered in serpent-like scales, and it's going to be that way forever.
Which was really bad news for Jane. We used the random hit location table from the Keeper's Guide to determine where the death ray hit her, and fortunately for her, it didn't hit her in that pretty face, but it did hit her in the dead middle of the chest, which means Jane ain't gonna be wearing any low-cut dresses for a while, if you know what I'm saying.
Once the gate has been handled, their next opponent is going to be a giant colossal snake. This thing is huge. It's over 100 feet long and has heavily armored scales, and it was the hardest opponent of this entire adventure.
That is putting it lightly. That snake swallowed JJ whole in one bite. Now, fortunately, JJ's got twin .45 pistols that he's got in some shoulder holsters, so he just got his hands in his armpits, pulled those puppies out, and just started firing away while he was inside it. And that snake ain't got no armor on the inside, so JJ turned that puppy into Swiss cheese. But before it died, that snake tail slapped Patch, and that thing does 8d6 points of damage with the tail slap, and that was enough to kill Patch outright. Now, Patch had enough luck that, of course, he got better from that, and he comes crawling out of the rubble, holding this crappy helmet that he had picked up back on the battlefield, and he's telling everybody how this thing had now this huge dent in it, and it totally saved his life, and now he wears this helmet everywhere he goes because it's his lucky helmet, and now his most cherished item.
Eventually, the player characters are going to make it into the vault where the serpent person mummy lies sleeping. If the player characters haven't taken care of all the serpent people and the soldiers, this is probably where they would show up for a big grand finale. Wasn't a problem in our game since they'd already taken care of them. Now, at this point, though, my players were a little too afraid to touch this mummy.
So we called for an airdrop. Yeah, they sent us chains and straps and a big locking metal box. And the first thing we did is we slapped a muzzle directly on that mummy because we didn't know if it was going to bite us or not. And then we wrapped it in chains. And then we threw that into the metal box. And then we chained the box shut because we were worried that maybe that mummy might wake up on us. And then once we got that done, we loaded that into the truck and we got the hell out of Dodge.
Once the PCs recover the mummy Tarnash, the adventure is done. One handy thing that I hadn't mentioned earlier, but in several places in this module, they include playtester notes of different little scenarios that actually happened during the playtest of this game. Nice little funny stories and memorable events. These are super duper useful to use when you're running this module, because if keepers find themselves in some sort of unexpected situation, they might look at those playtest notes and go, oh, this is how they handled it, or it might give the keeper ideas on how to make a certain interesting situation happen as well. Overall, my group had an absolute blast with the Bolivia chapter. The module calls itself epic and action-packed, and it does not disappoint. This session ended with every one of my players excited and looking forward to the next installment.
Oh yeah, I am pumped to get back to Caduceus and give them a piece of my mind for sending us down to Bolivia having no idea what it was we were about to face. I'm telling you that their HR department is about to get a very strongly worded letter.
My only real criticism is that while the module does give a lot of great roleplay hooks to take place in the aid camp, because the adventure opens with my players fighting soldiers and my players discovering that the leader of them was a serpent person that was disguised in human skin, it didn't really give any chance for roleplay here once they got to the aid camp. I should also mention that because my players then left the aid camp, then when the serpent people came there, they then retaliated and killed everyone in the aid camp.
Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. We lost some sanity for that one.
Keepers might want to put some forethought into how the NPCs are going to react once the characters come walking into this camp with soldiers as prisoners and possibly the body of a serpent person that's wearing part of the face of the officer of these soldiers kind of thrown over the back of a mule. What is it they're going to do? What is it they're going to say here? Now, maybe one of the doctors or nurses that's in the caravan with the player characters when this attack happens, maybe you can have one of them mention to the PCs that since there's obviously something unnatural and these monsters involved and these monsters are wearing human skin, that it might not be a good idea for them to come walking into the camp with a bunch of prisoners and with one of these monsters thrown over the back of the mule. They might want to keep this to themselves until they can figure out who's human. And that might start planting some seeds of paranoia that are going to be carrying on throughout the rest of this campaign. Or, if the serpent person Karnesh survives that opening encounter, if Karnesh gets away, how is he going to retaliate against the player characters after the player characters have arrived at the aid camp? Is he just going to come walking in and be all like, "Whoops, I thought you were enemy soldiers, my bad"? Or is he going to be doing something else? Or is he going to be trying to cover his tracks? The module lacks any follow-up on what happens with this opening scenario beforehand, so I suggest that keepers put some thought into some different things that could happen. That way, once they play the game, it runs really smooth here, and they can use all these wonderful roleplay hooks that are set up in the aid camp. Now, for the next episode, we're going to cover just a little bit of sprinkling of Chapter 2 before our characters go racing off to Chapter 3, North Borneo.
In an adventure that we like to refer to as JJ's Worst Day Ever.
See you next time.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. If you want to see some more of this series or any of our other reviews and other videos like that, just hit the subscribe button. Till next time, heroes, you have a great day. You know, we should have an airdrop in every adventure. Could you imagine how awesome The Haunting would have been had we had a freaking airdrop?